The planning, the construction of the Rudolfinum Landesmuseum in Klagenfurt began in the year 1879. And at this time, parallel in Vienna, there were already two huge museums under construction. This was the Museum of the Natural History and the Museum of the Art History. And from the year 1876, those two buildings were being executed by Karl von Hasenauer, Gustav's good friend. As mentioned, the city of Klagenfurt had donation a piece of land between already two big existing buildings. So it was for Gustav not an easy task, because he had to deal with a very actually narrow piece of land. A very narrow piece of land which on both sides was not offering a lot of space to put the whole building in the proper perspective. There was a nice open area from the side of the street, from some called ring streets, the street which goes around the whole city. But it was a very, very narrow. It was a very narrow place. But he actually mastered this task to still make it a very interesting building. The facade is very richly decorated with the stucco's works, and it has also an iconographical program, which is maybe not very elaborated, but which indicates what is the purpose of the building. That this is the museum, which represents as well fine arts, which represents as well architecture, which represents as well natural sciences like astronomy, geology, botanics. So in the zone between the above the architrave, there is still a decorative frieze, and in this frieze we have many symbols which symbolize different sciences. So for the history, we have, for example, some panoplia, pieces of armory, a helmet placed on the shield. Then we have a representative of the geometry, of the architecture, actually, one can say, where we see a hammer, where we see a sheet of paper to draw design on, when we see some rulers and other circle and other mason tools which can be used by the architect. Then we have a representative of the painting, when we have colors with brush depicted. Then we have the representative of the sculpture, where we see a head of a column with a hammer next to it. Then there is a representative of the geography, there is a globe, there is the representative of the natural sciences, like the natural archaeology, when we see skulls of some, we see a human skull and also a skull of some animal. We have the representative of the botanics with the beautiful bouquet of flowers. So this is pointing out which disciplines, which fields of science will be hosted in the Landesmuseum. And underneath this frieze, on every four risalids in the corner, Gugitz placed a so-called serliana, so a construction of two pairs of supportive elements like columns or pilasters, and the architrave above them makes a hemicircle. This is called serliana, and in the edges of the serliana he placed medallions depicting famous people, also originating from the different fields of science and arts. We have, for example, a tondo with the head of Albrecht Dürer, the tondo with the head of Andrea Palladio. This is actually very important. This is very personal for Gugitz as well. He was very, very strongly attached to the Palladian architecture. He was, we know it from the sources that he read Palladian's architectonical treatise. He even wanted to translate it in German. And then there are also some natural scientists, like, for example, Alexander von Humboldt, or another natural scientist, botanist, and zoologist Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck. So they represent that this museum should be a house to art and to natural sciences as well. This is all very richly decorated with the flower guirlands, with the festons. And it is very also it is also actually a very popular way to decorate the facade of the buildings back then. We found similar solutions, for example, when it comes to the symbolizing different pieces, different fields of studies of arts. We have a very similar motifs at the facade of the Natur- and Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna. This is actually relevant that Klagenfurt museum building was finished before those two big buildings. But we have very similar panoplias, for example, representing history. And also the same is the case when we speak about the famous persons representing different sciences. So when we stroll through Ringstrasse in Vienna, we find this motif of the medallion of the tondo with the face of the important representatives of science and arts all over the place. Just to start, they are tondos with the famous scholars or ornamenting facade of the university in Vienna. They are depictions of the artist as well at the building of the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, as in the maybe even in Gugitz's case, maybe even more or equally relevant, the Museum for the artistic industry, Museum des Kunstgewerbe. Gugitz was very closely connected to this institution. His good friend was the director there, and they were cooperating very often. A longer facade of Landesmuseum in Klagenfurt not only has a central piece risalit, but also two corner risalits. And to ornament them, Gugitz has thought about a very elegant solution. He placed there a Palladian motif. Palladian motif is a construction of a window closed with a round-headed archway and flanked with two perpendicular elements. Those might be another windows, rectangular windows, or, like here is the case, those might be simply only a pair of columns or pilasters. Gugitz used columns, and additionally, he ornamented these spaces above the Serliana with flower and fruit guirlands. And there he placed medallions depicting very famous people from arts and natural sciences. This motif of placing medallions, of placing tondos with the faces of famous representatives of sciences was very popular among the Ringstrassen buildings. Just to start, at the university, which facades are ornamented with the portraits of important philosophers, discoverers, of important scholars. Then we can move to two buildings which are extremely important in the context of Gugitz education. So as well as the building of the Academy of Fine Arts is being ornamented with very similar portraits of artists, although executed in a bit different technique. The building was designed by Theophil Hansen. And the other very important building, also very important for Gugitz, is today's MAG, Museum of Applied Arts in Vienna. Back then it was called Museum des Kunstgewerbes, and Gugitz was very close with its director and its founder, Eitelberger. And there on this building, finished a bit earlier than the Klagenfurter Museum, we can also find these tondos with the faces of other representatives of arts and crafts. The very rich frames for those medallions are also worth to pay some attention. We have namely fruit guirlands, which are hung on the false nails. The nails are executed in stucco, but their heads are very, very detailed, and they really try to convince us that they are real nails where you can hang something on. And so these fruit guirlands are hanging on those fake nails, and on every second nail there is this tondo hanging. There is this round construction with the face of an artist or a scholar hanging, and additionally they are decorated with ribbons, very beautiful ribbons executed also in stucco. And what is this so worth paying attention to is that this motif of such fruit guirlands hung somewhere, pretending to be actually a real flower ornament hanging on the real nails with the real ribbons. It's a very, very popular motif in Klagenfurt Biedermeier architecture. We can find a handful of houses which are ornamented exactly in the same way. And there is even one house still standing in the very close vicinity to Gugitz's parents' house. So it's like really just behind the corner. And we have there a very similar way of treating these false nails. Also, this use of the flower guirlands and ribbons, this is very similar. So we might hear there a statement that this was for Gugitz a way of paying an homage to his home city. And although, of course, I'm not saying here that the flower guirlands are something very unusual and that they are something special just for the Klagenfurt city, that, of course, this is not the case. But the way they are executed, the inspiration might have easily came from Gugitz's direct surrounding from the city that he knew very well from his childhood. Also, the interiors of Landesmuseum are under influence of Viennese buildings of the Ringstrasse. And as a highlight of the interior, Gugitz thought of a big column hall in order to display sculptures. And a very, very, very similar solution we have in the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna by Theophil Hansen. As well as in Klagenfurt, in Vienna, we have a rectangular hall which is surrounded with Doric columns, and between those columns were spaces to display big human-sized sculptures. The hall in Klagenfurt was also ornamented by the grotesque painting executed by Gustav Gugitz's father-in-law Pietro Isella, who was active on almost every big building site in on the Viennese Ringstrasse. Pietro Isella had also a huge workshop, was collaborating with other associates. Unfortunately, the paintings did not survive till our time. The museum building was in a pretty bad shape for long years, and it was unrestored. And those paintings went missing. Now there are only some relics left of them, and they won't be restored, which is actually a very, very big loss, because with these paintings and the open glass ceiling as Gugitz designed it, the room will really show itself in its all splendid as Gugitz wanted it to be, and as Gugitz wanted it to be received by spectators. One more thing which went inevitably missing, and which is being known only from the written sources, are the stained windows, which were sponsored by Gugitz's brother Joseph. He was a very well-known lawyer. He was an attorney in Vienna, and he contributed to the building of the Landesmuseum by paying for the colorful stained windows. We also don't know when they went missing. Most probably those stained windows went missing during the Second World War, when the building was bombed partially and it was rebuilt afterwards.